Hi, everyone. The True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, a black headset around my head, and an open green zip up hoodie with a gray Star Wars shirt underneath it. I'm seated against a olive green wall, and in the back, you can see my kitchen. Some amount of culinary chaos there. Uh, and like roughly 25% of Americans and a full 17% of Philadelphians, I'm disabled. Whether we look locally, nationally, or even globally, disabled communities are full of dynamic, diverse, and frankly delightful people with their own stories to tell. All we have to do is listen. As many of you know, I was born disabled. I've never known differently, and I probably always will be disabled. So I'm naturally curious when I come into contact with friends and colleagues who have their own diagnostic stories. Today, I'm excited to hear from my friend Rich. I've known Rich for a while now as a fellow disabled Philadelphian, and I can't wait to hear the perspective he brings. Rich, how are you doing today? Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Nico. I'm doing fine, thank you. And really, really glad to be part of this.
Of course, I'm really looking forward to your perspective. Let's dive into it. Uh, Rich, what was your path to diagnosis like? Was it maybe a surprise for you, or was it something maybe you were actively pursuing? Tell us that story.
Sure. Um, let's cut to Temple University in 1974. I graduated from the University of Connecticut, where I studied a number of independent study classes with Dr. Jack Thaw, who was the head of the psychology department at Mansfield State Training School. It's an institution that is closed today, but at the time, it housed hundreds and hundreds of people. I learned what today we would call applied behavioral analysis in order to help the residents there, and I worked there part-time and full-time over the summer between junior and senior year. Well, I came to Temple University because I wanted to finish a master's degree in education and to bring my experience into the schools. That didn't happen. What did happen is that my wife, who's now my ex, but we got married that summer. The two of us came here to Philadelphia with no family, no friends. And I finished 1 year of graduate school, and a very kind counselor tapped me on the shoulder and said, you know, most grad students don't get a lot of C's. And that's what you've been doing. Why don't you see a psychiatrist? And I did. I went to therapy. I got on medication, and I was able to stay married for over 30 years, which is really kind of cool. We have a lovely daughter, and I've been able to live a good life, and yet I've lived my life as an individual with, let's just say, mental illness. And you have to understand, in 1974, or even into 75, that was just about the time of the IDEA Act. And so in the schools, they were just starting to implement the programs whereby every student would be entitled to a free public education, no matter what their level of disability. A lot of real changes. But what I learned as an undergraduate was that the diagnosis was not that important. It was what you could do. A lot of behavioral psychology. And over the years, I've certainly understood now, much more so, that it's also my thinking. Maybe that's why I didn't do so well with the classes about Freud, because I didn't study that stuff. I was behavioral. But for whatever reason, I never finished my master's in psychology, but I did stay over the years in therapy, on medication, and working in one way or another on my recovery. Today, my diagnosis is OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Well, I relate very well to that, and I'm comfortable with the diagnosis. And but I'm still not hung up on it. The understanding helps me in some ways, but that's kind of how I got into my diagnosis journey.
Rich, thank you. I really respect the viewpoint that you bring and the biographical history that you provide. Um, right now, you carry a diagnosis of obsessive compulsive disorder. During your life, was it ever suspected to be something else, or has I guess this is a good question for you because you've studied psychology. Has the understanding of OCD as a disability evolved during your experience with the diagnosis?
Well, I only got that diagnosis within the past 20 years.
Okay.
So I guess I'd been diagnosed as depressed. And then in 1983, um, I was not thinking clearly at all. And I had a 1 month hospitalization. And again, if my audio is not clear, I can take my video down. I saw it getting a little wonky.
A little bit, but we're okay now.
We're okay. Okay, great. Just let me know. So anyway, um, certainly when I went into the psych ward, I was psychotic, but I don't remember getting a diagnosis there or being told a diagnosis even as I came out. I went back on my medication that I had taken for a long time. And then I went back to work the day after I came in.
That that's a really quick turnaround. Thank you for your answer. I know that wasn't a planned question, but I really appreciate the added context. Thanks again, Rich. So it helps me kind of segue into our second question for tonight, which is what impact has your diagnosis had on your life? So you talk about, um, being hospitalized, making sure that your treatment plan is working for you, and then you go back to work the very next day after you come home from that hospital treatment program. What impact has this OCD diagnosis had on your life? And you could consider this professionally, academically, civically, personally, whatever you're comfortable with, just giving us that fuller picture, I guess.
Sure. Um, I like my diagnosis.
Okay.
I'm uh, I'm really comfortable with the diagnosis of obsessive compulsive because my thinking definitely can get obsessive. And when it does, I can engage in compulsive behaviors. They have gotten in my way. They've gotten in the way of me working and staying focused at work. They've gotten in the way so that I would go off and engage in behaviors that I wanted to engage in as opposed to being home with family. Um, and so, to the extent that my thinking, the way I think, and the way I act can get in the way of me living my life, I'm really glad that, first of all, I have a diagnosis. And second of all, legally, under the ADA, I have rights as a person with a disability, because that's the definition of a person with a disability under the ADA. I've spent a majority of my life in the employment world, let's say. I learned after graduation, or that is after attempting grad school, that without a master's degree, I was not going to become a psychologist. Certainly not at that time, without the credential. And so I went into retail for 6 years because I had worked in my parents' store growing up, good transferable skills, and I was successful. I launched a retail jewelry store in a mall, took it over $1 million. I was able to put things on my resume, so I was functional for sure. And then I got into outside sales in the temp service industry because I knew I enjoyed what we call today human resources. They didn't even have the term back then. But there was also no pathway within retail for me to get involved with that function. They didn't have a department I could even move into. So in the staffing industry, I learned outside sales. But again, I was not the person who was really making the match. I was kind of facilitating the process. I would get the job orders, and then someone else would typically fill them. But I was fascinated by the process. And then by the early 90s, I got into workforce development. And I started helping people who needed help to get their jobs. And again, my disability never cost me my job. There was one time I spoke up too much and to my supervisor, which is not a good idea to do if you're in a small business. And then he came back the next time and he took me out for lunch and he fired me because the owner of the company didn't like my attitude, and also my performance was not good. I find careers fascinating. So anyway, but the impact of my diagnosis, I think it's given me clarity today that I know when my thinking becomes obsessive and I have to kind of shift it and redirect my thinking in a way that I don't have to stay in that obsessive mode. And I'm really grateful that I'm able to do that today. And I feel that my recovery is pretty strong.
Thank you, Rich. That was really nice of you to say, and it gives me a good sense of how you've handled OCD through your life. You've given a good comprehensive overview of kind of what your career has been, and I love that as well. I know you're really strong with like career coaching and in that sector. So as you look back on your OCD experiences, if you could go back in time and give yourself advice, or if you could even advise a younger person just starting their OCD journey, maybe someone who just got their OCD diagnosis, what advice would you give them?
Well, that's a great question. I think what's coming to my mind that I find is an interesting, just I think the question I would have to you would be, how old would the person be when they got that diagnosis? I think that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Diagnoses today are happening for younger and younger and younger people. But no matter what your age, really, don't be afraid of being disabled. I think that's my advice. And you're right, I am a career coach today, so I do coach other people. And I never imagined I'd come up with these words, believe me, until I came up with these words to describe myself. I'm a neurodivergent career strategist. How do you like that? Isn't that amazing?
That's a great
Uh,
LinkedIn title.
well, yeah, that's, branding yourself appropriately is very important, no matter who you are or where you are. So
That's
I've
true.
been creating a new brand. But the word neurodivergent or neurodiversity is so new. I didn't realize it was around since 1998, but now I do, and I've actually heard and Judy Singer, who first wrote about it. But the um, the world is so amazing today. The attitudes, the words. I had no idea I was masking. I was masking for 64 years.
All
Who
these
knew?
light bulbs go off in your head. Yeah.
I had no idea. And yet, actually, younger people, such as yourself and others, um, who have really led the way and broadened the conversation and made sure that the conversation got louder and louder and louder. And I said to myself, you know what? You could be neurodiverse. That's not too bad. And so, again, specific diagnoses I think are important, especially in the workplace. If an employer is going to require a diagnosis in order to give you your rights, and yet little hint for anybody out there: as long as somebody appears to be disabled under the ADA, they have all the rights they need under the ADA if they appear disabled. And I talked to an HR professional recently, actually, about how they're using that in order to help more people get accommodations in the workplace. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
there's some amazing new trends, I feel. And so, uh, yeah, the diagnosis is important. The recovery work is vital. Get whatever help you need, whatever's going to work for you. Try different, therapists if necessary, or whatever's going to be what's going to help you. Do it. Don't do it alone. Get help with other people, professionals, support people, healthy communities, um, and and don't be afraid of it, especially moving into the future. I just can't be more optimistic. There's a lot of work to do. Don't get me wrong, but there is such hope for, well, disability pride. We were just talking about having disability pride, and it's just an amazing thing that so many more and more people just need that. That's all you need.
Rich, that was such a hopeful and like optimistic answer. I feel lighter for having heard it. Thank you so much. All right, my friend, as our time together draws to a close, I want to give you a chance that we as disabled people so rarely get, and that is a chance to really promote yourself, put yourself out there, brag a bit if you have a recent success that you want to brag about. If you are interested in building community or networking, getting your name out there, where can people find you online? Go ahead, step up on your figurative soapbox, my friend. Let's hear it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and you can drag me down whenever it's been too long. Um, so anyway, I I'm on LinkedIn. Uh, Probably, I don't know, I might be the only neurodivergent career strategist, but it's Rich Davis. And I have a company, career coaching and consulting, and that's called Comfort Career Connections. So you can find me on LinkedIn, please do. Um, I also have a website, and my website is mycomfortjob.com. I also have a website at mycomfortjob.com dot, I'm sorry, mycomfortjob dot harrisonassessments.com, because I've decided, instead of getting my master's, that I was going to become accredited to utilize the Harrison assessment. It's a talent management system that analyzes 175 individual character factors for how much you enjoy using each one. And I can show my clients the jobs that they would enjoy, numerically ranked. So I offer virtual coaching and the Harrison reports, so that I can help people put together a realistic career pathway that will definitely lead them in the way of success, because they're going to enjoy what they're going to do. So they're going to obviously then learn and the skills and the that they need in order to do that. So it puts the passion first. It's been growing nicely. That's where you find me for private career coaching, consulting if there's a business that wants to attract and retain neurodivergent candidates. And oh, by the way, there's one other word that you'll find me, and that word is QIWID. If I well, when I walk in the disability pride parades, I've got this sign that I wear. It simply says, I am a, it's QIWID, qualified individual with an invisible disability. If I didn't have my sign, people just wouldn't know. And now I want people to know. And so that's my word. And it's better than other words people could call me, I think. So I just use that one. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nika.
Thank you, Rich. That was a very creative answer. I always enjoy spending time with you and community friend. Wherever you go, whatever you do, I can't wait to see what you do next. Thanks for spending time with me.
Thank you.
Take care now.